Song called Trust in You. Welcome to our 5th annual Night of Hope. My name is Sherry Anisich, and I'm honored and blessed to be here with you tonight. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our pastor here at Holy Family, Father John Fan, and the people who helped make this evening special. Thank you for attending. Your presence is such a blessing. My wish for you tonight is that we leave here inspired, hopeful, and encouraged. 7 years ago today, on August 19th, I was given the worst news any mother could bear to hear. My daughter Alicia and her unborn daughter Ava Lucille had been senselessly murdered. This is a day that my life changed forever. How did I make it this far to be standing here before you? Exactly as the song says, trusting in God. I know some of you here are going through your own tragedies, such as a divorce, financial stress, someone you know might be suffering through cancer, or a very important person in your life might have passed away. Sometimes there are no clear answers to why things happen, but this beautiful song says it all, trust in God. How do I do that when nothing makes sense? God said in Proverbs 3:5-6, trust in the Lord and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. I read this after my daughter and granddaughter died, and it really helped me. There was no way I would ever understand how a person could kill two innocent, beautiful souls. The reality is we don't know what God is doing in and through our circumstances. Jesus endured hardship and suffering, and he chose to trust. So when you pray and you don't get the answers, should you give up? This is where trust comes in. Keep praying and keep trusting God with the answers. He knows everything that is happening in your life, and He will use it for His good. My daughter Alicia's birthday is 8/28. God led me to the Romans 8:28. It states, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who are called according to His purpose." Our speaker tonight, George Dennehy, is a true example of trusting in God. George has a very powerful message to share tonight. George overcame many challenges in his own life. One challenge was he was born without arms and put into a Romanian orphanage right after birth. He was unwanted and neglected in the orphanage. At the age of 2, he was adopted. He believes that every individual has a purpose and absolutely anything is possible. Life wasn't easy for George. He was bullied throughout middle school, which took him down a very dark path of anger, depression, and suicide. I felt it was important to have George here to share his story because sadly, suicide among our youth aged 10 to 24 is the second leading cause of death. Tonight you were gifted 2 booklets. One is Heaven Speaks to Those Considering Suicide, and the other book is Heaven Speaks About Depression. Please pass these booklets on to anyone that you feel might need them. I would like to pray for those who are depressed and feel hopeless. Dear Heavenly Father, you are a refuge in good and bad times. In your infinite mercy, bring peace and comfort to those who face days filled with pain and depression. Help us to realize that through you there is joy and the promise of lasting peace. Help us through the rough times, walk before us and beside us, so that we may walk in your footsteps and reach out to you in our own journey on this earth. Help us to focus on our blessings rather than our misfortunes. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen.
Another important message George will share tonight is about being bullied. I am sure at one time in your life you have witnessed someone being bullied or harassed. My daughter Alicia was harassed at her workplace. The person who killed my daughter was her boss since the age of 16. She had worked in a flower department in the summer, which was nice when she came home from college. She was harassed, bullied, and was manipulated by her boss. Others at her work were physically and mentally abused by this person, and no one said a word. I believe Alicia would be alive today if someone had spoken up. My husband and I found out after she had passed how she and others were mistreated. I know my daughter, and I know she thought she could handle it. But tonight, I'm asking you to stand up. Don't tolerate bad behavior, and don't let others tolerate them either. Don't be afraid to tell someone what is going on, whether you are the one being bullied or merely the observer. We need to have the courage to stand up for those who can't or won't defend themselves. You need to know that you are special to God and created in His image with immeasurable worth and value. I love our speaker George's favorite saying, "I am different, but I'm not less." His testimony of victorious overcoming has inspired thousands of people all over the world. George started his musical journey early in his life by playing the cello at age 8. He advanced in classical music until he was able to play the cello with regional orchestra. With the cello and his launching pad, he has taught himself guitar, electric bass, and piano. The Google Dolls invited George to play with them, and he received worldwide attention. George received a standing ovation for his first TED Talk. His videos have been viewed over 5 million times. Today, he travels the world full-time sharing his story and his music. He is also a youth pastor and a designated spokesperson for Holt International, a global organization that helps orphaned, abandoned, and vulnerable children to thrive. Please welcome George Dennehy.
Oh, thank you. Man, thank you guys so much. I haven't even played yet. What if I'm really bad? You can't take that back. You can't take that applause back. Well, hey, it's truly a blessing and an honor to be here. I just want to thank Joe and Sherry and how amazing they are and they've been. And I gotta say this, like I've only known you guys for a couple of hours now, but I really feel like we're very dear friends. And I'm so excited for the rest of this evening and for the rest of my time here. But hey, I just want to go ahead and start off and play a song for you guys and just worship with you all. Look, if you know this song, I'm going to play one of my favorite songs. It's called How He Loves. If you know this song, I want to invite you to sing with me. I want this to be a time of us just worshiping our Lord together. And so if you're not singing, then I'm going to stop singing because you got to sing with me. Just how beautiful you are and how rich your affections are for me. And oh, how he loves us so. Oh, how he loves us. How he loves us. Jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy. Oh, when all of a sudden I am unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory. And I realize just how beautiful you are and how rich your affections are for me. Yeah, he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. Yeah, he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. We are his portion and he is our prize. Drawn to redemption by the grace in his eyes. If his grace is an ocean, we're all sinking. Oh, and heaven meets earth like an unforeseen kiss, and my heart turns violently inside of my chest. And I don't have time to maintain these regrets when I think about, oh, the way that he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. Yeah, he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. Oh, how He loves. Man, thank you guys so much. I heard a couple of you singing, so good job. The rest of you, we'll work on it. Well, hey, my name is George Dennehy again. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. I'm 25 years old, and like you heard, I travel around and just play music to whoever might want to hear it. And I got to say, you guys are very brave for coming tonight, because I'm sure for all of you, you're coming to hear a guy you've never heard of. Maybe play some songs you might not have heard of either. So I applaud you, if I could. I do. So a little bit more about me. I'm also a youth pastor in Richmond. So on the weekends, I try to be home so I can really invest in the students that I have. And I'm going to talk more about why the student age in middle school and high school just means a lot to me, because that's where I went through a lot of my stuff. We all go through things in life that are just unexplainable. And we were talking about this earlier, how I'm the kind of person that I wish I could have the answer for everything. I wish I could tell myself why things happen the way they do, why I was born without arms, or why somebody might be going through something. I wish I had all those answers. I think I'm just a perfectionist like that. And I'll get more into that later. I'm also a single dad to a 5-year-old boy named Landon. He's not here tonight, because if he was, I don't know what he'd be doing. I don't know what he'd be doing. And I want to share more about that story and kind of just another area where just life came down on me, and I had to trust or be angry. So the first thing I want you to know about me is that being born without arms and being born different, and you know this, you know that when you see somebody who's different from you, you notice that person very easily. They stand out from the crowd. And I've always just stood out from everybody else, People have always asked me questions, and when I'm out and about and people see me, a lot of people aren't very afraid to ask, what happened to you? Where are your arms? What happened? And, throughout my life, I've just told people, this is just how I was born. I was born without arms. I was born this way, and people are like, so what did you do, or what happened to your arms? And I was just born like this. And the more and more I was telling people, this is how I was born this way, I was born this way, I was born this way. I don't know if you know where I'm getting at, but I started to think, man, I'm sounding a lot like Lady Gaga right now, telling people I was born this way, I was born this way. There was one time in particular that I want to share with you, a story of when I was really able to talk to somebody about the way I am. One of my favorite things to do, one of my favorite hobbies, besides playing music and besides drinking coffee, I love drinking coffee. One of my favorite hobbies is I actually love to swim. I'm a huge swimmer. I love it. And I don't brag about myself very often. You never hear me really talk about what I've done or where I've been. I don't like talking about myself, except I'm doing it right now. But one of the things I am very proud of is that I can do a perfect pencil dive. So when I get in the pool, when I go off a diving board, I can just easily, I can win any kind of pencil diving competition that there will ever be. About 2 hours from where I live in Richmond is Virginia Beach. So all the way at the coast, Virginia Beach. And every summer, I'll try to go there a couple of times because I really love the ocean. There's something about the ocean, just how just vast it is and how big it is. I'm really in awe about it. And it was a few years ago where I was at the beach, and I decided to get in the water. So I want to try to paint you a little picture of what this scene kind of looked like, because I was deep enough in the water where you could really only see my head. So you couldn't tell that I didn't have arms, so all you could see was my head. And I was pretty deep in the water. So when I'm that deep out in the ocean, I have my deepest moments with the Lord in those times, because I'm there in the water, just kicking my feet, just saying, please, Lord, just help me stay afloat. Help me right now. I'm kicking as hard as I can. And but I decided to get out. So what it looked like was this head starting to swim up to the shore. And as I started to stand up and get out of the water, you could see the water, go down and my body go up. And as I started going up, my arms, there were no arms, right? So people were giving me weird looks, like, how low are his arms? But they're just not there. And I started to walk up back on the shore, and I was walking past this family. And it was a family, it was a mom and a dad, and they had a little girl. And the little girl at that point must have been 4 or 5. She was just so small. And here's the thing. Kids usually don't have a filter at all. When kids see something out of the ordinary, they just don't have a filter. And I want to tell you, too, from my experience, from my 25 years of life on this earth, adults also really don't have a filter either. We're not very different from those kids. But kids especially. So I'm walking, and this kid looks at me, and she just points and says, "What's wrong with you?" Like kids just don't have filters. So she looks at me and she says, "What is wrong with you?" She's looking at me like all confused, and I don't know, she's probably thinking that I'm either some kind of dolphin or some kind of sea creature. She has never seen somebody like me before. Let me just tell you that. And I looked at her, and when she said that, I started to tear up. I started to cry. And the reason I was crying was because I'm one of those idiots that opens his eyes underwater, no matter where I am. So I had salt water in my eyes, and that stuff burns. And I'm not very brave, so I'm in pain with salt water in my eyes, so I'm starting to cry. And I look at her, and I just look at her, and I tell her, when I was your age, I didn't eat my vegetables. Yeah, and wow, you guys are a lot nicer than a lot of other people. I'm getting an applause for that. I've had a lot of nasty looks after I've told that story before, so thank you. And her face after I told her that was completely shocked. She was making this weird face, and I was half expecting her dad to just punch me in the face, which I would have accepted. I'm like, I probably deserve that. But she looked over at her dad, and her dad just stood there, and he just did this. And I look, so they start walking away, and I start walking, so we walk our separate ways. And I look back at them, and the dad looked back at me, and he just gave me this thumbs up. So, I don't know, you kids, where are you kids? If there's kids in here, eat your vegetables, because the Bible says your arms are going to fall off. I'm just kidding. Doesn't say that. I've made up a lot of stories for a lot of people. So at the beginning of my life, you heard a little bit from Sherry, but I want to go into more detail of the start of my life. Because where my story begins is a place of hopelessness. I was born in Romania, and the truth being, I was born without arms, so you all know the truth now. So if I try to make something up, you're like, you're not fooling me. So I was born in this small little village. It was a tiny little village. My biological parents were just really poor. They didn't have what it took to take care of kids. They had 3 of their own already. And another thing about Romania and a lot of other countries, which is really sad, is that when a child is born disabled, or imperfect, quote, I'm just putting quotes around that word, right? They're often seen to be just cursed by God. Even sometimes they're believed to have evil spirits living inside of them. And my parents, knowing that this is kind of the norm in Romania, they had to make an impossible decision, right? Because they could try to keep me, and what would my life be if I stayed in this place? I'd be an outcast. When they took me home from the hospital, my parents told me this after being adopted. They told me that when they took me home from the hospital, the rest of the village shunned them, outcast them, because they brought this curse back into their village. So my bio parents, I call them my bio parents, they put me in this orphanage, just hoping that maybe somewhere out there he could have a better chance at a better life out there. But it wasn't a very good orphanage. We see orphanages sometimes where the conditions are terrible and it's overcrowded and it's just a nasty place. And this was one of those places where there were way too many children for cribs and for nurses. So, us kids, there were probably 2 to 3 in one crib. It was not a good place at all. And these nurses were so scared of me. They hated me so much. They never picked me up. They never loved me. They never held me. They never cared for me. They would actually walk by, and instead of feeding me a bottle, they would just throw a bottle in the crib. And, if I get it, then okay. But if I don't, then, good. So I was in this hopeless situation. And one of the things I want to talk about and just talk a few examples about is how, sometimes, and a lot of times in these hopeless times in our lives where it just seems like there's no way out of where we are, I want you to know that God is working even in those times. We can't see it because we're human, because we're flawed. Our vision is just blurry, and all we see is what's in front of us, but God sees the whole picture. So across the world, on the other side of the planet, the Lord was working on the hearts of who would be my adoptive parents. My parents had 3 kids of their own, and they were a church-going family. They were just doing life and loving life and very comfortable and very happy, and they had a red house with a white picket fence and just the very, trophy family. And one day, something happened to them. Something happened to their hearts where they were talking and they just felt this unexplainable conviction, I guess, if you will, of their lives. And they both felt it at the same time, and they thought, we got to do more. We can do more. For the kingdom, for the glory of God, we could be doing more. Rather than just being comfortable. That maybe God calls us as believers to be more than just comfortable. I guess we can get by just doing what we're supposed to do and, whatever, going to church and doing all that stuff. I guess we can get by, but maybe God has such a bigger purpose for us than just being comfortable. And my parents really felt that in this time in their life. And long story short, because I'd be here for hours, but long story short, that led them to this idea of adoption. And it really started with a maybe. It wasn't like, oh yeah, we're going to adopt, we're doing this thing. They kind of started with this, well, maybe this is something we could explore. Maybe this is something that we could actually do. We don't really know. We don't know anything about adoption. We don't know where to start, but maybe. And it was that maybe that led them to an organization called Bethany Christian Services. And they had some friends who had already adopted through this organization, so that was the connection there. And they were looking through this newsletter that Bethany, I guess, mailed out. I guess back then, you actually got newsletters in the mail. I don't know anything about that, but I'm like, wait, they didn't check their Instagram? All right, anyways. So they got this newsletter in the mail, and they're looking through all the pictures and everything, and they were looking at all the kids, and they saw this one picture, this black and white picture of this baby boy with no arms. Just right place at the right time, I guess. And the description on the picture said, baby boy, born without arms, desperately needs a loving family. And then it went on to say, this boy will soon die, ... See, what had happened was that there was a doctor who came into the orphanage to look at all the kids and do like a medical evaluation, I guess, of all the kids. And he came over to my crib and he saw the condition that I was in, the lack of care that I was getting, just how skinny I was and just sick I was. And he told the nurses, there's no hope for this child. He's just going to die soon anyways. He's just going to die soon. So he took a piece of paper and he taped it to my crib and he wrote in a date. He wrote in a month and a year. And he said, you just fill in the day of when he dies. Because that day is coming. So he labeled it death date. I had a death note on my crib in this orphanage. And I don't know about you, but no child should ever have a death date on their crib. Ever. That's crazy. Just complete hopelessness, complete abandonment by even my parents, even my biological parents, which I struggled with for a very long time. And then the nurses and this doctor who was right there, he saw that I was sick. He could have easily just picked me up and, took care of me, but no, he just wrote a note. But even then, God was working. Even then, God was moving. When my parents saw that picture of me on this newsletter, and it's this blurry black and white picture, you can barely even make out what it looks like, what I look like. But they knew right then and there that God was calling them to bring me home. So they flew to Romania, and they picked me up for the first time. I was 2, and I weighed 9 pounds at 2. And I couldn't hold my head up. I was pale. I was sick. My dad tells me, he's like, you looked like a dead corpse. Like you looked like a corpse. But they also say that when they looked in my eyes, they could see just a glimmer of life. Just a glimmer of life. And sadly, when they went through this adoption process, they went to visit me and visit my biological family, visit the orphanage, but then they had to go home, finish all that paperwork and do all that, and then go back a second time. My dad said that when they went for the first time, they could not believe the condition I was in. So my dad flipped one of the nurses $20, just in American money, which I don't even know how much it is, but probably more. And he told the nurse, or he told the translator to tell the nurse, make sure he's in a better place by the time we come back, and there's more where this came from. And lo and behold, yeah, they came back to adopt me, and I was much, much better off. So when I was abandoned, when the world left me to die and abandoned me in this orphanage, love came in and rescued me. And I want to talk about my family just a little bit, but they're not going to be the focus of tonight. But my parents, so they had 3 of their own, they adopted me, and then they went on to adopt 9 more children from 5 other countries. So I come from a pretty big family. We're a little different. One time we were all eating dinner at the dinner table, and this dinner table is like this long, crazy dinner. It's like the size of this church. So we're eating dinner, and this repairman walks in to work on the sink or something, and he looks at us, and he's like, "This looks like the United Nations or something." Some Southern guy with his belt, and he's like, "This looks like some kind of United Nations." I want to share with you a quick story about one of my siblings, though, because it was about a year after I was adopted where my parents, I talk about it like this, my mom kind of got addicted to adopting, honestly. Kids, animals, whatever, it doesn't matter. I call her an adoption junkie, honestly, because it was a year after I was adopted where my mom was looking through another newsletter, through another organization, I think, and she saw this picture of a boy a year younger than me, or a year and a half younger than me, born in India, and he was born without arms, just like me. Bilateral upper limb deficiency is what the medical term is. 1 in 2 million kids are born with this thing. I don't want to say disease, with this difference. So my mom's, she saw this boy needed a home, and she called my dad over. She said, Mike, this would be perfect. They can be brothers. They can grow up together. They can learn how to just do life together and all this stuff. And if my parents were here, they would say the exact same thing, that my dad is the brakes on the operation, on this whole operation. My mom is the gas pedal, she just floors it, and my dad's the brake pedal, let's just hang on. But I mean, come on. I think wives win, usually, in the say-so of things. Next thing I know, I have a brother. I have a little brother. One of my first memories was meeting my brother for the first time. He walked in the house, and his name was Kartik in India, but my parents renamed him to James, which is actually my middle name. So they were already running out of names at this point. So James walks in the house, and my parents are like, George, this is your little brother James. And we shake hands. No, I'm just kidding. We don't do that. But I remember James. This is so vivid. You just have some of those memories when you're little, and it's so vivid. But I remember James walked over to a bin of toys that was clearly mine. It wasn't his yet because he just got there. But he walks over to this bin of toys, and he starts putting his little feet in the bin of toys and starts picking out stuff to play with. This is he first walked in. He didn't even say hi to me. So he first walks in and starts playing with these toys. And I had to show him, you can't do that. You can't just walk in here. I've been here a year, okay? You've been here a second, So I walked over to my brother, and I took my foot, and I tripped him with my foot. I tripped him from under his legs. And us armless people, when we fall, we just fall. We can't really catch ourselves. We can roll into it, I guess, but there's no catching ourselves. And I knew that. So I tripped James, and he fell, and he hit his head on the tile floor, much like this. And I really thought, okay, good, I showed him. And I started to walk away, and all of a sudden I saw this Indian foot in front of me, and then it tripped me. And I fell. And from then, this eternal rivalry between me and my brother, we shared a room all growing up, as you can imagine. That many kids in one family, you have kids like sleeping on the ceiling, bathtubs, whatever. Just kidding, it wasn't that bad. But we shared a room growing up, and anytime we would fight, it was one of those things where, we'd get really mad at each other, right? We'd be just really angry. We'd be like, okay, we're about to fight, so all right, let's sit down first. No cheap shots to the groin or anything. Like, let each other sit down. And then we just flail our legs at each other, just like crazy, just kicking each other. And what's the hardest part of your foot? The heel. Yeah, so we'd hit each other with our heels. And just that hurts, like bruises on your legs and all this stuff. And my dad would see us fighting, and he would say, hey, George, stop healing James. James, stop healing George. Yeah, and we look at him and be like, that's not... That's my dad for you. But hey, I want to talk about just kind of growing up in I guess, my difference. Because as you can imagine, there were a lot of challenges I had to learn to overcome, and things I had to learn to do my own way because I was born without arms. And I speak at a lot of schools, and I do a lot of youth groups and stuff like that in churches, and oftentimes I'll do like a question and answer at the end, because I know people have questions, and I'm at the point in my life where I'm like, ask your questions, let's go. But a lot of times people ask like, okay, so how do you brush your teeth? How do you eat food? How do you get changed? How do you do this? How do you write? How do you blank? How do you drive? All this stuff. And my answer is always the same. I just do it with my feet. I do everything that everybody else does. I just do it my own way. And you heard Sherry say that just because I do things different, just because I'm different, doesn't mean I'm less. And that goes for everybody. Just because somebody's different, and kids, hear this. I don't know if school started yet, but when you're in your school and you see somebody who's different, approach them. They're not any less. Different's different. Everybody can see that I'm just a normal guy. Like, I don't have arms, but I'm just a normal guy. So from a young age, my parents really instilled in me and my brother and some of my other siblings too with different challenges that we can do anything. We can do anything unless we know we can't. Which, sounds obvious. Like, you can do anything unless you can't do it. But that's kind of what it was. Because, when you have a challenge or when you have a disability, sometimes the first instinct is to assume that I can't do something. And I had that mindset for a long time growing up, especially as a kid and a teenager, that, oh, I can't do that. I can't do this. Or there's no way I could do that. That's impossible. That's too hard. That's too difficult. That's too much. That's too difficult. And my parents, I got to give them credit, even though I hated it. I hated it when I was little, but I give them credit now because now I live on my own. I'm a single dad. But they really set me up to be independent. But when I was a kid, it was through this tough love. It was through this, you're going to figure out a way to do it because you can. There is a way to do it. There has to be a way to do it. And just like little stuff. Little stuff I thought was too hard, like getting a drink of water from the sink with a cup. I remember I'd be a kid and I'd go to the kitchen and I'd ask my mom if I can have a drink of water, and she would say, yeah, you can get a drink. And I'd say, okay, well, can you get it for me? She'd say, no, you try. And I would say, I can't. I can't do that. And then my mom would say, have you even tried? And I would tell her, well, technically no. No, I haven't. And then I figured out, like, well, actually, well, yeah. I mean, I can grab a cup from the drawer. I can open the drawer with my foot. I can grab a cup. I can reach up, put the cup on the counter. I can get a chair. I can sit on the counter, and then fill up the water. It's a long process, sure, but it gets it done. So I over my life, I found my own way to do things. And it's so interesting to me, which I get it. People are so interested and so, obsessed, not obsessed, that's a bad word, but just interested in the way I do things. My physical challenges. How did you overcome your physical challenges? How did you overcome getting changed? Or how did you overcome brushing your teeth? That must have been so difficult to overcome. And I mean, honestly, not really. Not really, because this is all I've ever known. I would say just imagine it, but I know you can't imagine it. But just like I can't imagine having arms. But because I was born like this, I just learned to do things naturally. And I even remember being a kid, and a couple of times my parents had signed me up, not signed me up, but they had a therapist, like a physical therapist, come to our house with this weird robotic arm, like a prosthetic, right? And they would hook this just prosthetic on me and tape it on. It's this process. They tape it on my shoulder, and this prosthetic had 2 buttons. Like hours of spending time with this stupid prosthetic. It had 2 buttons. It had an open and a close. Right? And so this physical therapist is teaching me, and she's like, okay, now it's like toy fruit or toy vegetables. And she's like, okay, now try to grab the fruit, grab the vegetables. And I remember this so clearly. I must have been 6 or 7. I'm like trying to get it with this prosthetic arm, like hitting the button with my shoulder. I'm like, this is so dumb. Like, why am I doing this? And I couldn't get it, and I kept dropping the thing, and I got so mad. And she's like, no, you can do this. This is going to be really helpful for you. That's what she said. This prosthetic is going to be really helpful for you. And I said, how? I put the prosthetic to the side, and I just grabbed it with my foot and pretended to eat it. I was like, I'm good. I can eat. I'm good. So I stopped using that prosthetic because I didn't need that. So when I was 7, my parents thought it'd be a great idea for me to learn to play music. At the time, we lived in Connecticut, and just a little bit of background of this Connecticut lifestyle, I guess. We went to a very small church. I was homeschooled for a lot of my younger years, and then I went to the private school, which is at the same church that we went to. So I lived in this very just small community, I guess, small town, Coventry, Connecticut. And there was a music teacher in our church who taught every single kid in our church. It was just like the normal thing, like every kid took lessons from this one teacher at the church. So my siblings all took lessons, and I got old enough, and my mom just, without a second thought, said, we're going to sign George up for music lessons. We don't know what he's going to play, but we're going to figure it out. So my mom went up to the teacher. Her name was Jennifer Petrie, and she told Mrs. Petrie, so I have another child who's going to start taking lessons from you. And Mrs. Petrie said, oh, awesome. And my mom said, so he doesn't have arms? And Mrs. Petrie was like, oh, okay, well, let me get back to you. And she did. Listen to what Mrs. Petrie did, because this is so amazing. This teacher went home, tied her hands behind her back, put a cello on the floor, and forced herself to learn how to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star with her feet, just to see if this was possible. And it was. She could do it. She played Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Stars with her feet so that then she could teach me. And, I really didn't appreciate that when I was a kid. I really didn't think about it much. I was like the 7-year-old boy. I didn't want to take music lessons. I hated it. I hated playing the cello. A lot of people think, like, oh, were you always passionate about music? And I was like, no. I was not always passionate about music. I hated it. I hated having to take lessons and practice 2 hours a day. I hated that stuff so much. I hated it. Did I say I hated it? Okay. But now looking back and thinking about how Mrs. Petrie taught herself, and really what she did was she put herself next to me. She put herself in my place so she could help me get from where I was to where I needed to go, which is just to learn to play the cello. And that wasn't the only time people would do that for me in my life. And maybe there are people in your life who have done that. Maybe there are people who have come beside you at a time of darkness and have felt your pain and have walked through it with you. I hope you've had people like that in your life, because that makes all the difference in the world. And I cannot express how thankful I am for Mrs. Petrie for doing that for me when I was a kid. And I've told her thank you many times. She's probably sick of it by now. So I started learning to play the cello, and I learned to play all the songs there was to learn. We went through a course called Suzuki. Has anybody heard of Suzuki? So we went through Suzuki, and I got to book 7. was the last book that I remember being at. And that was some pretty intense stuff. You know, the cello was a very difficult instrument to learn. It's a very complicated instrument. You don't have frets, first of all. So like on a guitar, I can see where the notes are. I can see what frets I'm playing. But a cello, you just got to hear it. You just got to listen. So I remember just being so frustrated at certain times learning this instrument and just thinking that it's too much, it's too difficult. I have to make an extension that's impossible to do. But then Mrs. Petrie, she would push me and push me and push me, and boom, I get it. You know, how many times in my life where I wanted to give up? But I had people around me who believed in me, that pushed me, and reminded me that I can do it. I can get through this. And those are just the physical challenges. In the summer of 2006, I was 12 years old, and my parents, they told me and the rest of my siblings that we're going to make a move. We're actually going to move down to Richmond, Virginia. They had some friends that lived down there, and they said something about like the market being good, and I had no idea what that meant. They said taxes are lower there, and I was like, I don't know what that means either. But they just said it'll be a really good situation for us, and when they could do it. So we moved during that summer, just like a month after they said that we're doing it. So I had no heads up, I had no warning. Everything I knew in Connecticut, all my best friends, the people I grew up with, ever since being adopted, I almost said ever since birth, but not really. Ever since being adopted, we were leaving behind. And I was not happy about this at all. You know, who's ever had to make a move in their life at a time like middle school or high school or just any kind of big time where it just stinks? It does. It really stinked. I didn't want to do this at all. It was not fun. And my parents also said, oh, and also you're going to go to a school called Oak Knoll Middle School, and you're going to love it, George, because there's hundreds and hundreds of other kids. So you're going to make lots of friends, and it's going to be so good. Unlike the 3 classmates you have at your now school in the church, which your classmates are your siblings. It's very different. So let me just kind of walk you through these next couple of years, because these years were some of the worst years of my life ever. They were some of the worst. I'll get to the actual worst later. But I remember that first day of school, I was this 12-year-old kid with my just Spider-Man backpack still at 12. And I remember my parents saying, okay, so go to the end of the driveway and you're actually going to get picked up for school. And I'm thinking, get picked up for school? What are you talking about? They're just like, just go, you're late, go to the driveway. So I walked to the end of the driveway, and I was just looking around. I didn't know what was going to happen. And all of a sudden, this big yellow machine drives in front of me. And the doors open up, and like this dust goes in my face. And this lady is looking at me, and she's like, you getting on? I'm like, I guess this is it. So I step on this, what I learned was a school bus. And I stepped on this school bus, and students, have you ever ridden a school bus before? Like, do you guys ride buses here? You do? Okay, so for those of you who have ridden buses and school buses, there are 2 types of bus drivers. 2 types. There's one type where they're very sweet. It's a nice old lady. She waits for you to sit down, get buckled, and she looks up in the mirror and says, you good? All right, let's go. That's one type. There's also another type. And I think these types come from a very different place. I don't know where they come from, or, I don't know who, hell. I said hell. Because this type, you get on the bus, you take one foot, and you put the other foot barely inside, and the door's already shut, and you're already at school. That's the other type. This is the type that I had. So I took one step on this bus, and all of a sudden, she's already zooming down the road. It's a cul-de-sac. She's like turning around. I'm like bouncing around, trying to not fall, because what happens when I fall? I just fall. Yeah, clearly. So I'm trying to look for a place to sit, and here's what happened. I was walking down, it's kind of like this. I'm walking down the bus aisle. It's much more narrow than this, though. And say I see a spot right here. I'm like, hey, can I sit with you? You have your stuff there. Okay, so you got your stuff there. You keep your stuff there, right? Or maybe I keep walking. I got to find somewhere that doesn't have any stuff. You all have stuff. What's going on? All right. You don't have any stuff. All right, so I see a spot with no stuff, right? So I'm like, look, there's an open spot right there. I'm going to sit next to you, but you put your stuff there when I start to sit down. And I did that all the way until the back of the bus. I don't want to step on my guitar. All right. It's actually not mine. It's Luke's guitar. Thank you, man. I did that all the way to the back of the bus. And I know some students will look at me like, yeah, you got to sit in the back. That's awesome. That's cool. When I was in middle school, back in the old days, the back of the bus was not the cool place to sit. That's where all the weirdos sat. And we got to school, and I walked in, and I started to get my locker open with my feet, which I will admit, that's not very easy. And I could just feel all eyes on me. I could hear the whispers. I could hear the giggles, the little laughs. I could hear the name calling. I could hear kids walking by like, what? Like, what? You know, making comments. I could hear it all. Fast forward in the day, and, you know, we go to lunch. And, you know, in the cafeteria, you grab your tray, and you go through the lunch line. But I couldn't really grab a tray and go through the lunch line. So this teacher came to help me, which was completely embarrassing. I know she meant well. It was embarrassing. You know, she came and we're going through the lunch line, and she's like, okay, do you want some vegetables? Yeah, let's get you vegetables. Yeah, you want some. And she's like, you want chicken? Yeah, you want chicken. So she's getting me all this food, and she sits me down. She's like, okay, enjoy your meal. And I'm like, okay. So I put my foot up on the table. You know, I hold a fork with my right foot. Raise your hand if you're right-handed. Raise your left hand if you're left-handed. Okay, did you know you have a dominant foot? I'm right-footed. I'm straight up right-footed. Yeah. So I eat with my right foot, you know, like I hold a fork with my right foot or hold a coffee mug, you know, I do that. And I'm just eating my food, and kids are walking by, and they're looking at me weird and making fun of me and calling me names and laughing. And this is just day one. So imagine day after day after day after day not stopping and even getting worse. So I stopped eating lunch at school altogether, because I was so ashamed of the way that I ate. I was so ashamed of the way that I was born. I was so embarrassed of the way that I ate my food that I just stopped eating. Then I go home super hungry and just try to eat all the food I can when I'm home. You know, this went on in these years of 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, even into high school. And, you know, being picked on and being called names, maybe you've experienced this. Kids, adults, I mean, we could all experience it, really. We can all experience getting picked on, being called names, being left out, being treated bad, being treated different, maybe because we're different. See, we're all different. And it got to this point for me. And follow me if you know what I'm talking about, but some of you may not, and I hope not, because this is a very dark place. Because I got to a point where the names, being called a freak, being called a weirdo, being called a pencil, being called an ostrich, which I'm now looking back, I'm like, that's pretty funny. You know, I do run like an ostrich. Anyways, being called some of these things, you know, these names, I got numb to. I just became numb to. The name calling, the being pushed in the hallway, you know, being tripped in the hallway, having my backpack taken off my shoulders and thrown down the hallway. You know, I just got numb to all that, honestly. But what I never got used to, what I never actually got used to was being just completely alone. Or feeling completely alone. You know, because I had no one. I had no one who would sit with me at lunch. I had no one who would play with me at gym class. I just had no one. And I don't know, I feel like for us as human beings, being at a place where we just feel so completely alone is one of the worst places we could ever be. Especially when we're going through something terrible in our lives. We can just feel so alone. And I remember, you know, being this teenager and we have questions. When we go through something, when we're dealing with a terrible situation in our lives or a traumatic event or something just horrible, it's so natural. It's very natural. And it's okay to have questions. And I was this 14, 15-year-old kid now, just in my room thinking, you know, God, how could you do this to me? How could you do this? I grew up in this church, right? I grew up hearing all these things about, oh, God loves you, and God has a plan for you, and Jeremiah 29:11, and Philippians 4:13, all these verses that are sometimes taken out of context. I grew up hearing all this stuff that God loves me so much that, he has a plan for me, and God never makes mistakes, right? There are no accidents, And here I am, this 15-year-old kid going to school every day, getting picked on, getting bullied, getting hated on, getting told I'm never going to have a girlfriend because, what kind of, when you're a 15-year-old boy, this doesn't sound like a big deal now, but like when you're a 15-year-old boy and like kids are saying, what kind of girl is going to want to date a guy who she can't even hold his hand, Kids would tell me that. And I'm in my room just saying, what kind of loving God does this? What kind of loving God just decides that I'm going to be born without arms? That decides that I'm going to be going to this school, that we're going to move, and I'm going to be picked on and bullied. Like, what kind of God does that? And I'm sure many of us in our lives have wondered that same thing. Maybe you've asked those same exact questions. Maybe they've been different in some kind of ways, but maybe just the root of it, God, how could you do this? What kind of loving God does this? And the truth is, the enemy got just such a strong hold on my heart. I became so filled with hate and sorrow, and I hated myself. I hated God. I hated life. I looked at myself in the mirror, and I hated what I saw back. I just wanted things to be different. I wanted things to be better. I would be up at night, and I'd be praying, right? Praying. I say that like I actually was praying. But I was yelling at God. I was saying, God, what the heck? Like, if you're real, let's do this. Let's do this, God. If you're real, then make me wake up tomorrow with arms. Because that's what I want more than anything, just to be normal. I just want to be like everybody else. So make me wake up tomorrow with arms. And then I'll follow you. And then I'll know, okay, you make miracles happen. You can do some crazy things, just like in the Bible. Then I'll know. You do this for me, and then I'll trust you. And then I'll follow you. You see what I'm doing? You see what I did? It's God, you do this, and then I trust. The trust would come second, which that's not trust at all. And I'd love to tell you that I woke up the next morning with arms, and then that whole day I forgot to eat my vegetables. No, but that never happened. I never woke up with arms. So I'm this kid at this lowest point in my life, and maybe you've been there. Maybe you've been at this point where you cannot go on any further. You just don't think you can do it. You cannot go another day in the place that you are at now. Because I knew when I wake up tomorrow, I'm just going to go to school. I'm just going to be picked on by the same kids. I'm going to be bullied by the same kids. Like, I don't want to do that. So I really did think that it would just be better off if I just wasn't here. Like, it wasn't like I don't know how to explain it. I wish I could. It was kind of just like a peaceful, like it would just be better if I wasn't here. It's just kind of, I accepted that. At least I thought it was true. And I remember one Sunday, we were in service, and I didn't want to be at church. Last place I wanted to be was at church. Like, why am I worshiping a God that just creates people without arms? Like, what the heck? I didn't want to be here. And the pastor was talking, but I was playing with the bulletin. Like, on our bulletins we had like these cool bubble letters that you could color in. Like, it looks pretty cool when you actually draw it in. Kids, you ever do that? Like, it's okay if you do. No, it's not. Don't do that. But it looked really cool. So I was coloring in the letters and stuff, like New Hanover Church. I was coloring those in. And then the pastor said, okay, so now we're going to read out of John chapter 9. And this pastor had a really boring pastor voice. Like, I don't know if your pastors are like this, but he just had it's just really boring. I don't know. He had one of those voices that was just very, and now we're going to read John chapter 9, verses 1 through 3. I hope I'm not a boring voice. Am I a boring voice? Do I have a boring voice? Am I just really loud? I feel like I'm really loud. Anyways, I've been told I'm really loud. So he starts reading out of John chapter 9, verses 1 through 3. And I've heard this story before. But I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm reading Scripture or just in the Word, sometimes verses and stories that happen can jump out at me like no other way it ever has before. So to paraphrase, John chapter 9 is this passage in Scripture when Jesus and his disciples are walking on this road, and the disciples see a blind man. They see this man who is blind from birth, the Bible says. And the disciples, right, Jesus' closest followers and friends, look at this blind man, and much like a lot of people who look at me, just look confused. I imagine they look confused. And then they ask Jesus, like, Lord, why was this man born blind? What sin did his parents commit? Or what sin did he commit for him to be afflicted? So I'm really paraphrasing here. So if I'm getting something wrong, somebody stand up and throw me out of here. Anyways, but they're asking, like, something must have went wrong. You know, somebody must have done something bad for this to happen, because this is bad. Somebody must have sinned. And I'm telling you guys, when I was going through this time in my life, I had some crazy thoughts. When you're depressed, you have some crazy thoughts. You have some very just dark thoughts that are not from the Lord. They're from a very different place. You said it already. You know, I thought, like, well, you know, maybe I was born without arms because maybe my biological Romanian parents were bad people. You know, maybe they were big sinners. Maybe God's punishing them by making me like this, and they got rid of me because they couldn't stand the punishment, right? You know, I'm having all these crazy thoughts. But then Jesus just says, you know, the Bible doesn't say that Jesus does this, but I have to picture, and I can't wait to ask him this when I get to heaven, I have to picture, like, Jesus, did you just kind of like stand there and shake your head a little bit at your best friends? Because they see this blind man, and they're like, Jesus, like, Lord, who sinned? Why is he born blind? Like, something must have went wrong. And I just kind of picture Jesus, like, thinking, you guys have been traveling with me for years. I don't know if it was years at this point, but for a while, and you still don't get it. You still don't get how the Father works. Because he tells his disciples, like, no, it wasn't his parents' sin or his sin that this man was born like this, but this man was born blind so that the works of God could be displayed through him. And I heard that in this church service as a 16-year-old kid, and something changed. Something just shifted, I guess, in my heart, in my mind. You know, this verse is saying, like, yes, you know, this happened. This man was born blind, and it could be seen as a bad thing, but this is God we're talking about. This is the creator of the universe. Don't you think he can work even in this? Don't you think he can even work through this blind man? And I thought, like, okay, obviously praying that I have arms isn't going to give me arms. You know, I can't control this. I can't control this. So I thought, maybe. Remember, sometimes it just starts with a maybe. So I want you to be open to the maybe. Sometimes it starts with, maybe God can work through this. Maybe even here, God can use me. Maybe even here, God can use this. And in a way, I feel like that's what this whole night is about. That's why it's so special for me to be here. I'm still surprised that I even get to be here and talk to you guys, because this night is so powerful and is so meaningful and so special. It's a big deal. This night is a big deal. And I just want us to think about the maybe. Wherever you might be in your life. Because when I said that, when I started thinking and just kind of processing, like, well, maybe God can use me too. You know, Jesus said that God can work through this blind man. Maybe God can work through me too. And when I was open to that maybe, that's when my life changed. That's when my perspective changed. When my views on my struggle and my disability, it's not a disability. You know, it's an ability that God has given me. And even so, I am blessed to not have arms. Almost I'm thankful for this. People ask me, like, you know, if you could have arms, would you? And now I'm at the point in my life where I would say, I wouldn't. I prefer my life this way. because I know that even in this, God can work. I just have to be open to it. And it was getting to that point of, even in this dark time, even in this desolate wasteland that I feel like I'm in, maybe God can move even here. Maybe God can still work. And if I didn't go through that, there was no way I would have gotten through my divorce. Ever. I was married for 3 years to this really hot, beautiful girl. Sorry. To this really beautiful lady. And it was like, I haven't talked about this ever, so just bear with me because this is new. But like, we met and just, of course when you first meet, it clicks really awesome and you're just having fun, whatever. And we got married very soon after that. And then 11 months later, we had a baby. We had a son. And then 3 years later, I come home to a letter, a note. Something about me and notes. Death notes, divorce notes. I don't know. Something about these notes. I come home to a note that just says, I don't want to be married anymore. I want to do my own thing. And that was that. It broke me. It shook me to the core. Fast forward from there, not even much fast forward, but fast forward a month, she's in another town with another guy, right? And then we begin this year-long process of, okay, what are we going to do with custody? What are we going to do? So we're doing court stuff, and it's just this mess, right? And this was worse. This was far worse than going through that stuff in middle school. It all was bad, but this was far worse than middle school stuff. Because this wasn't about me. This was about a toddler, my toddler, where I didn't do anything. I'm just doing me. I'm just me. I stayed in the same house. I didn't change anything. And I just really prayed, and I had trust. It was because of what I went through earlier that I could now just be like, you know what? I got to start this whole trust thing from the beginning. Instead, because believe me, I wanted to say, God, make this work out for me, and then I'll trust you. But think about it. I think, what if instead we trust God no matter what? And it was actually during this time. This is probably 2.5 years ago now, 3 years ago now. I think so. It was during this time when I really started to focus in on Daniel. There's one part in the book of Daniel. You guys know the story, like Daniel in the fire, right? Or is that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? That is Daniel. It's the same guy, I think. Man, I need to brush up on my Old Testament. Anyways, so they're refusing. They're refusing to bow to this king, right? They're refusing to bow to the world. And I want to tell you guys that when this first happened and my ex was like, all right, I'm done. We'll do my own thing. I so badly wanted to just go off and do my own thing too, whatever that looked like. And believe me, I had some friends from high school that were like, okay, you're coming out with me now. Now we're going to the club. Now we're going to meet some girls. Like that. Bowing to the world. But the book of Daniel, it says that they declined. They refused to bow to the world. And they even said, even if our God does not deliver us from the fire, we will still trust him. Like that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense, but it's the Bible, and I love it. So I had to make that my prayer. I had to make that my choice was, you know what? God, for some reason, even if this doesn't work out in Landon's favor, and he has to live with this new guy who, I don't even know, she doesn't even know, even if it doesn't work out, I'm still going to trust you. And just long story short, it all worked out. I'm not happy about this, but a week before the final court date, I'm just going to share this. A week before the final court date, her life fell apart. The guy broke up with her. She didn't have a home. She came back begging me to just have mercy. And I was like, yeah, if you can get an apartment and just chill with the guy stuff for a little bit, then we can continue this custody because Landon needs a mom too. And that's where we are. So, that story, though, is my example that I want to share with you about just even in the darkest times, even in the wasteland, trust. Trust that God is who he says he is, that he can work even when it doesn't even seem like there's no way he could possibly work. I'm probably getting crunched on time here. So I want to go ahead and just close here with a song. I really do hope and I really do pray that, me being here and sharing a little bit about my life maybe has inspired you or encouraged you in some kind of way. With whatever you're dealing with right now, I wish I could hear every one of your stories. I can. I'll be here after. So honestly, come say hi to me. Hey, I actually need to volunteer real quick. A student, does any student want to volunteer? Okay, you with the phone. Yeah, you got to put that phone down. We're in church. All right, I'm just kidding. It's okay, come on. All right, so I joked for a second about the whole, me and my brother shook hands, right? That's actually not a joke, because a lot of times when people meet me for the first time, what do you think they do? Put their hand out. It's just natural. So I came up with a little thing called a foot five. What's your name?
Emma.
Emma? Okay, so this is Emma, and we're friends now, right? Okay, so me and Emma are friends. Actually, let's pretend we're not friends. Let's just meet for the first time, which we are. Okay, anyways, this is Emma, and I'm meeting Emma, and I say, hey, Emma, I'm George. And you say,
Hi.
you're...
Hi, George. I'm Emma.
She's doing so good. All right, let me do a foot five. You just kick me. Foot five. Thank you. Can we give Emma a round of applause? Go ahead. You can take a seat. Thank you. Awesome. I know a lot of you couldn't see that, but it's a foot five. We just kick each other. It's hard. She actually kicked pretty hard. So I'm just kidding. She did. She's good. So if you want to talk to me after and just say hi, or I'd love to pray for you too and just pray with you. I love praying. Sometimes I'm just talking to God all throughout the day. I'd love to just talk with you and meet you all. But I'm gonna go ahead and close with a song. Do we have time? Do I have time to close? Okay. I'm gonna close with a song that I wrote. I mentioned that I don't really like bragging about myself, which I really don't. But this song kind of has some story to it. So just really quick, I'm gonna breeze through this. You can do your own research if you want. I don't like talking about it. But after high school, I decided to pursue music full time. I decided to just see where it goes. I really felt like the Lord was calling me to just speak and share and do music. And just some doors opened up, one of those including recording a CD in Nashville and playing with the Goo Goo Dolls and playing with other artists like Jeremy Camp and David Crowder and Hillsong, playing with different groups and speaking with different speakers. And that's all I'm going to say about it, because I'm nothing special. I'm just a vessel. Anyways, so this is a song that I wrote called Not Abandoned. And I think this is, make sure it's in tune. So I wrote this song called Not Abandoned when I was really thinking about the past couple years of my life and going through some of the stuff that I've been through and some stuff that we all go through. And oftentimes, I mention this, it's so easy to feel like we're the only ones who have ever gone through it, which we know is not true. I'm telling you, when my ex was like, I'm done, I don't want to do this, I thought I was the only one ever. I felt like I was the only one who knew what I was going through, right? And sometimes we feel like that. And it's just another reason why this night is so special, because this is a reminder that there are people who have gone through or are going through the same stuff that we go through. And that we can find a lot of strength and a lot of hope together. It's never very easy to go through things alone. So don't let yourself be alone. So this is called Not Abandoned. Every day, every hour, wondering if you'll make it out. You've been here for as long as you can remember, trapped inside this hollow shell. You're not abandoned. You're not alone. There is a family that wants to make you their own. You're gonna find out that on this broken road there is a pathway that's gonna lead you home. You're not abandoned. You're not alone. There is a Savior. He wants to make you his own. You're gonna find out that on this broken road there is a pathway that's gonna lead you home. You're not abandoned. You're not abandoned. You're not abandoned. You're not abandoned. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Well, hey, thank you guys again. You can be seated, I think. You can be seated if you want. Yeah. Thank you guys again so much for being here, and again, thank you, Joe and Sherry, for just trusting me to a guy you never heard of, who plays music you never heard of. I really hope that the Lord spoke to you tonight. That was my prayer, that it's not me who's talking. Trust me, it should not be me. It should be the Lord. And I'm excited to meet you all after. Thank you.
So this is quite interesting. When we were setting up, I saw a plaque out on the table in the front that we had, and I said, how fitting for today, Jeremiah 29:11. When you were hopeless in middle school, God had a plan for you. And I want to thank you for sharing your music, and it's obvious God does have a plan for you. Thank you. Each year during the candlelight visual, which is next, we sing Ave Maria. The Blessed Mother helped Sherry and I when we lost Alicia and Ava. We were hopeless and consumed with grief. We turned to the Blessed Virgin Mary for hope. Who would understand us more than a mother who lost her only child to murder? And the Blessed Virgin Mary is the model of faith in God the Father. So we like to dedicate this time for her. Praying the rosary and trusting in the Lord, we found hope again, and we were able to make it through our darkest days. The Ave Maria will be sung by Twyla and accompanied on piano by Jim Clower. After the Ave Maria, sit in silence, quiet your mind, and breathe naturally. Release any thoughts of negativity lingering in your mind. Allow only positive thoughts. Close your eyes and see a world filled with only happiness and prosperity. A lit candle symbolizes the light of Christ. Lighted candles help eliminate our hearts when we feel burdened. You are invited to reflect on whatever is resonating within you at this moment. Recognize that there are blessings in everything, even those most difficult life challenges. Offer your blessing, or say a prayer for yourself or someone else, or even offer gratitude. Imagine the candle light raising your intention to our Lord. We'll have 3 minutes of silence after the Ave Maria to reflect. So we have the students here to help light your candles. So please light your candle and light the person next to you candle with your candle. And if you don't have a candle, raise your hand and someone will bring one to you.
You guys can all blow out your candles now if you want to. Thank you. On behalf of the Purple Project, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. Hopefully you were all able to take away some snippets of inspiration and hope from what you've seen and heard tonight. I know I did. This night is so special to Sherry and Joe and the Purple Project. They are thrilled to be able to give back to the community who so generously supported them with meals, love, and many prayers through their grief journey. This is one way they are able to honor the memory of Alicia and Ava. I want to thank Holy Family Parish for once again providing this amazing event tonight. They are a wonderful partner. Don't forget to fill out your prayer cards that are at the end of your pew. The Lay Apostle group at St. Mary Immaculate Parish will be taking our prayers intentions, and they will continue to pray over them for the upcoming year. You can leave them in the box at the back of the church or in the pews, and someone will pick them up. And I especially want to thank George for his inspirational words tonight as he has overcome so much. He will be back in the narthex, as Joe had said, ready to meet and greet all of you. By now, you know this mission, the Purple Project, is Sherry and Joe's calling, a way for them to honor Alicia and Ava. They have hosted 4 grief retreats so far and are providing phenomenal support that is affordable for grieving parents, which they realized this was something that was seriously lacking when they were going through their own journey. This will be even more affordable for grieving parents now that they have their own venue, the Alicia and Ava House of Hope in Oswego. They held their first on-site grief retreat last October on their beautiful and peaceful grounds. They held grief yoga this summer and are offering one-on-one counseling. Monthly meetings are also held for those dealing with grief. In addition, the Purple Project has assisted 18 single mothers over the last 6 years and now have a designated space to meet with them regularly. All of this in addition to the annual Nights of Hope that have been attended by 1,900 people over the last 4 years. I'm telling you this because we, as a non-for-profit organization, exist and are able to provide these services through the generous donations and support of those of you in our community. So if you feel it in your heart to donate any amount and support this mission of love, there are envelopes inside your booklets. Feel free to hand them to any of our volunteers standing or put them in the donation box that's up at the front on the way out. You can also mail it in at any time. On behalf of Sherry and Joe and all who volunteer for the Purple Project, thank you very much for your presence here tonight, as well as any donations that you might make. I'd like to close with the following prayer. A prayer for hope. Lord, help me hear you saying, I am your hope, over all the other voices. I'm running to you with both hands stretched out and grabbing onto you. Fill me up with hope and give me a tangible reminder today that hope is an unbreakable spiritual lifeline. In Jesus' name, amen. And lastly, I'd like to take just a quick moment of silence for Kathy Zoll. She was a Purple Project volunteer and Sherry's aunt who recently passed away. Thank you again for attending tonight, and God bless you all.